Alrighty, guys. So in this video, we're going to talk about the introduction of our IMRaDR research report with a couple of examples to look at how it not only what to do, but how it's done, okay, and also a little bit around the purpose of the introduction. Um, Really quick here, I just wanted to show you guys some of our sources that you have access to. Obviously, we have our Moodle, and to make sure to just check every week. All right. But we have all of these IMRaDR and IMRAD documents, such as the IMRAD report essentials, and we'll look at that. The IMRAD content guidelines. Be advised that these are IMRAD specific, not IMRaDR. Okay. So these are IMRAD specific. And then we have IMRaDR specific stuff like these right here and these videos that we do where we talk about things with examples, right, of what specifically I want. MIT and Stanford also have some guides there, so you can check those out. We have a couple of examples. We have an example of a recommendation report from our textbook. So this is just the pages from that. And then we also have our AMA style example, which we can also look at again briefly today. So just remember that those exist there. There are going to be no PowerPoints about the introduction this week, partly because you guys have written a lot of introductions as students and as writers in your life. And also partly because we've already read the Scientist Guide to Writing, right? So you hopefully already actually have an understanding of what the introduction should do for the IMRAD. And so we've already kind of heard a lot about the introduction, and so we're going to go through it and just verify and clarify some things and look at some examples, but it should be pretty straightforward. So what we're going to look at first is the IMRAD Report Essentials Guide, which looks like this. All right. Right here, IMRAD Research Reports. So again, it's only IMRAD focused. I did create this myself here. Oh, I didn't put my name on it. Oopsie. Or did I? Nope, I didn't. All right. Anyway, not important. All right. So introduction. What is the purpose of that introduction? Well, IMRAD reports have existed for many decades, over 50 years. And when they were first created, I mean, they've evolved as a genre, and they continue to evolve. And how you write each section does differ depending on your field and your professor and your the journal that you want to publish in, for example. But generally, the introduction used to be what the abstract is now back then. So back when it was first kind of a newer thing, or at least not so not currently as it is. Back then, the introduction was that thing that the abstract does, which the abstract is to engage the reader, to interest them as to whether or not they want to read this report. And so the introduction does have a lot of overlap with the abstract. And from what I have found, the major difference with the introduction and the abstract, first of all, the abstract has a very unique length. And we'll make a video on front matter stuff, including the abstract, and back matter stuff, probably next week or at a later time. But the abstract has certain requirements, like a certain word length, and being very concise. Oftentimes, you don't use sources in the abstract, and it's just straightforward, straight to the point, right? Formatted usually similarly in all journals, and whereas introductions might vary more. And so they eventually invented this abstract later. I think, I'm not sure when, maybe, does the Scientist Guide Writing say? I can't remember. Maybe it was like 80s or 90s. And maybe the Scientist Guide Writing already said all of these things. But suffice it to say, the introduction is still doing a lot of what it did before. And so there's a lot of overlap there, which is going to make it easier for you guys as writers. But here in the introduction, generally speaking, we want to interest the reader in some way and provide a basis, a background, a foundation of what it is we're going to be doing in this in this report, in this research, okay, depending on what you're doing exactly. For us, uh, we need to know, and this is very important, that a problem actually exists. If there is no problem, then there isn't really a purpose to creating a recommendation report to find a solution. And so that is one of the big things that I look for personally when I'm reading through your guys' introductions is, did they state that the problem exists, and did I believe that it exists based off of how they stated it and what did they and the sources they cited? And does it make sense that then therefore we're doing this recommendation report, that we're going through this 6 weeks long process? And if this is actually a company, we're paying you money to do all this work, right? And so we do want to know that it actually is a problem. Now, for a lot of you, that would be pretty easy, okay? For some of you, that is harder. I think for most of you, though, it shouldn't be too hard. Just make sure that you do that, okay? That you really clarify that this is indeed a problem, and we'll look at examples of how this is done, okay? Yeah, so just generally background information, you're going to interest your reader. While we're on that topic, let's talk about organization. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about what goes in the introduction, and we'll look at 6 specific things that I want to see. It'll be quite easy for you guys, I promise. But organization. With the introduction, organization goes like this. We start off general, kind of wide right here up at the top, right? And as we read through the introduction, we get more and more specific information, more and more and more and more specific, okay? And so it's this inverse pyramid, okay? It's a funnel or a cone or whatever you want to call it. Now, I am not a fan of cliche intros, and students really, really like these, okay? In the 21st century, right? Nowadays, everyone loves dogs or whatever, right? These huge blanket statements that apply to a million people or a billion people. And they're very cliche. Okay. Please don't use like this big giant general phrase of that's super cliche. If you want to try to write a hook, you've likely heard and been taught about hooks. Feel free to do that if you feel like you are good at it. But honestly, I would rather have you just go right into the information, right into the details, excuse me, instead of spending a lot of time thinking about how to do a hook, and then your hook ends up being weird or awkward. We just want to go right into the information, okay? You do need to consider your audience. Your audience is a general audience, okay? So if your research is about something that is very technical or detailed, you're going to have to find ways of communicating that information in a little bit more basic terms, okay? Now, you're usually writing to someone who has some understanding of these ideas. So like if you're writing about something about NU, then you're writing to President Katsu. If you're writing about something to do with like flooding on streets in Nur Sultan, then you're writing to the city planner maybe of Nur Sultan. If you're writing about 5G towers, then you're writing maybe to telecom or something like that. But you need to make sure that the information is general enough so that like a general audience within that group of people would still understand it. So you don't have to necessarily explain the most basic terms. Like if you're writing within academia, there's certain academic terms that we use that might not have to explain if you're writing to President Katsu. But because we know that this recommend report goes to the President Katsu, but it might also go to his, minions. And so we want to make sure that it's understandable. Okay. All right, let's continue on. We're spending too much time on that. These are the 6 things that I want: background, unknown, question, purpose, or discovery, experimental approach, or in our case, more likely methods. Okay, methods, results, implication. Now, these are the 6 main things. This is something that comes from a textbook called, I'm not sure. All right, I can't remember. Sorry. Let's see. Where's it at? All right, it's not important. Okay, it is kind of important. Let's check real quick. I just, we need to know. All right, so here's our other readings. Nope, it's not there. You know what? It actually might not be on here. Why does it do that for you guys sometimes? When you like go back, it's like suddenly gigantic. Why does it do that? That's weird. If you know, email me and let me know, and you get an automatic A. Just kidding. All right. So we got this from a book about things. I would ask that you guys maybe try to use some of these template phrases. Do you have to use one of these template phrases? No, you don't. Okay. You don't have to use one, but I do think it is helpful in looking at examples of what we're looking for here. Okay. And so we start off with the background information. It's just the is. Okay. And so if we were to look at an example here, say, sorry, I'm going to do that a lot and it's going to be annoying. Let's see. Sex is, all right. Sex is a fundamental part. If we look at another example, let's group all the examples over here. All right. Electronic cigarettes were introduced into the US market. Let's look at one more example. Let's look at this one, the AMA one. Starts out with the term background, and it says, globally, there is an increase in awareness of importance, right? And so we just kind of start off with this general statement. You know, it often seems like there's an is or a was or were, but there's often a verb. And we're just giving background information. And this is really where you prove to me that there is a problem, in fact. Okay, it's just in the background information. And it doesn't have to be like pages long, it can be a paragraph. Okay. But you're going to be citing secondary research here as well. You're going to be citing secondary sources. If you're talking about suicide and whether or not it's a problem, it's pretty clear that suicide is a problem. And so like a paragraph is enough for me to believe, okay, this seems to be a problem, or 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs, but just, you know, it doesn't have to be that much information. The introduction can often be just a page long, all right, single spaced. All right. And then after we do the background, okay, we've looked at all of our 3 examples, right? We have, we don't need that one anymore. We might look at that one in a second. So we're here, just organizing. Okay. And then we go to our unknown. And this is kind of where we're trying to fill a gap in the research. And that's part of what a research question does, and part of what you want to do as a researcher is you want to fill a gap. Okay, there is something that we don't yet know, and we want to figure out that solution. Okay, if you're looking at why students are struggling to sleep well due to online education, there's a gap there. We don't know, at least for NU students in our situation in 2020 during the pandemic. Okay, there's a lot of secondary research that will explain why students might not get enough sleep. And that's a lot of good information. And that helps fill our gap. But we have a little tiny gap. It's a little tiny gap. And it's often focused on NU or Kazakhstan or your city, right? And so that's how we make it really specific. Let's look at a couple examples here. All right. So this is all of their information to let us know that it is in fact a problem. They say previous literature on the importance of sex education and its effects did investigate the topic in these countries, but it's not studied in Kazakhstan, right? And so there's an unknown there. All right, here we have a lot of background information to let us know all this information here. And then we say, in Africa, the demand for high quality research at undergraduate level is yet to be met. Okay, there's an unknown there. Okay. Right here, to our knowledge, there are few studies that have more comprehensively examined these things. All right, there's an issue there. Okay, and so you can bring up the issue in one of these ways like this, or a different way. It's up to you. And then we move on to the purpose. Now, this is where you're going to bring in your research question. You might also mention briefly what your purpose is as far as like you are looking for solutions. Okay. So answering your research question, finding solutions to the problem. Those are our two main things here. Okay. Um, and so, to find solutions to the problem of whatever, right? Um, we're looking at, we are looking um, um, at how, and then your research question, right? Or something like that. Okay. And so, let's see. In order to move to be more specific, no, okay. So these guys actually did it a little bit out of order. And so we'll come back to that. Let's see here. Right here. The purpose of the research is to determine the cause or lack of sex education and underline the effective solutions, right? Effective solutions. And then they end the sentence there and they add another sentence where they bring in their research question. It could all be done in one sentence. It's kind of up to you. I mean, there's leeway there. Okay, it doesn't have to be done exactly in one sentence each six of the parts, right? It's up to you on how you want to do that, and each of you might need to do it a little bit differently. All right. Okay, we don't need to look at a million examples of every single one. So let's continue on here. Experimental approach is just the method, okay? And in fact, I would actually prefer you guys use the phrase method or methodology. Yeah, for our class, we'll say it's okay either way. Experimental approach doesn't quite fit what we're technically doing as like with our research, but we'll allow it for now, okay? But you can use any of these phrases to list very briefly, okay? So background information is going to take up a lot of space. Saying what the unknown is could maybe just be a sentence, but it might take a couple of sentences to lead up to it maybe. This might take a sentence or two, okay? The experimental approach might take a sentence or two, the results a sentence or two, and the implications a sentence or two. So you really don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this stuff, okay? In fact, I think it almost gets shorter and shorter as you go, okay? And so experimental approach, you're going to tell us what you did, all right? And so if we look at, I accidentally clicked away on that one. Here, we examined these things, right? That's what they did. Here, actually, this one, interestingly, doesn't talk about what they did. It tells us what they're planning on doing, but they actually don't give away the ending. So that's one interesting thing about introductions is sometimes they give away the ending of the entire report, and sometimes they don't give away the ending of the entire report. For our class, we're giving away the ending of the entire report. Now, different teachers might teach it differently. So just remember that for our class, we want results and implication here, okay? So results. This is where you're going to briefly say, this is what we discovered, okay? We discovered based off of our primary and secondary research, the stuff that you described just barely. We discovered, we discovered based off of this research that, you know, this is the most effective method or whatever, right? And then what does that imply? What are the implications of that, okay? And so we want to make sure that we give away the ending. We spoil what our result is of all of our research. And remember, the whole purpose of our research is to find solutions through a decision matrix, right? To offer recommendations, or study solutions through a decision matrix to offer recommendations through primary and secondary research, right? Okay. Let me look at my notes here to make sure I hit every important point. All right, yep, we hit all those. So for things that have already happened or already been accomplished, use present tense. Just look at kind of what they do here. The literature thus far has been, and so it's present tense, saying like this is the current problem. Even though there is some past tense here, there's also still some present tense there. So if it's still a thing, right, it's present tense. When you're talking about what you did, you're going to be in past tense. We examined, right? This is what we discovered, we realized, things like that. But then present tense over here, okay, for things that for the problem, right? Um, Okay, yeah, so that's it for the introduction. Like I said, it doesn't have to be really that long. This one is shortened, obviously, by the way. I don't know if you guys realize that. We cut it up and we broke it up into the different sections that I think the Scientist's Guide to Writing is, it says to break it up into these 3 parts, right? So that's why that one exists like that, okay? Um, so yeah, it's going to be about a page or so long if it was single spaced, double spaced, maybe, obviously, uh, a page to 2 pages, but it doesn't really have to be that long. It needs to be as long as it needs to be to include enough background information for your audience. So for some of you, that might be a little bit longer. For some of you, a little bit shorter. There is no page length on any of the parts of our report, okay, or any of our sections. So good luck on this. I think that's enough information to write the introduction with already also having all of the other resources that I've already given you guys. If you still want more information to help you get through this, check out our other resources, all of that other information. I will be publishing a video on uh, looking at an entire example and going through the whole thing through the methods, results, discussions, or anyways, the IMRAD, all of the sections, okay, either this week or next week. But this should be enough information for the introduction. And now you're just going to take this and then you're going to continue to revise the older drafts you have of the methods and the results and the discussion, the recommendation, and you'll put all of that together for the second draft IMRAD that you submit this weekend, okay? Good luck, guys. As always, let me know if you have any questions. And do remember that if you want to be able to do the self-evaluation worksheet and meet with me next week, you do have to submit this full IMRAD on time and do it properly, get the full points. It's pass-fail. And then you can also participate in the self-evaluation that's due mid next week, as well as meet with me to look over your draft. All right. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you soon.